Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I don't know what time it is that you're listening to this, but this is Sherry Honeycutt, and I am excited to bring to you part 2 of a podcast that I started last week called The Recipe for Your Ideal Life. If you haven't listened to it, you might want to listen to it first. If you have, we're going to continue on. In last week's podcast, I told you about the first 4 of the 7 ingredients that I think, when you put them together, are the recipe for living an outstanding and fabulous life. And in this podcast, I'm going to fill you in on the remaining 3. And like I said last week, each of these 7 ingredients are in and of themselves huge concepts that bazillions of books have been written about and we can talk about and forever. So I'm just going to be giving you thumbnail descriptions of each of these ingredients, but I hopefully will give you enough that you can go, aha, I really want to begin to incorporate these 7 ingredients. And I believe when you do, you will be able to live a much more delicious life. Hello, I'm Sherry Honeycutt from Life by Design, and I'm excited to share with you some tips for creating the beautiful life you've always intended to live. I've created this podcast and really designed all of my work for folks who are kind of like me that wonder, is this as good as it's going to get? I promise you that what you gain from this little bit of time with me will work faster than therapy, be more permanent than plastic surgery, and be way more satisfying than a shopping trip to Target. On this podcast, I talk about ways that you can design your beautiful life on the inside and the out. I invite you to learn more about me at sherryhoneycutt.com, sherihoneycutt. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and let's get started. Clearing your mind, clearing the clutter, and clearing a path to the life that you've always intended. Well, this is part 2 of a podcast that I started last week, but I'm also doing something a tiny bit different. Typically in the past, I've been writing out what I'm going to say. I've decided not to do that today, so I'm just flying off the cuff here. We're going to see what I say, but that's just sort of a sidebar. But I want to first recap what I talked to you about in the last podcast. I talked with you about the first 4 ingredients, so let's recap. The first one is, and I argued last week, it is the most important that you take 100% responsibility for everything in your life. 100% responsibility. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, I encourage you to do so, because I talk about when you take 100% responsibility, then you have all the power to change something. Number 1 ingredient. Number 2, you want to have a crystal clear vision of what it is that you want. What is it you want to be, to do, and to have. You want to be able to say, that's what I want. And then the third ingredient is you need to be able to know why you want it. What is it that you want and why do you want it? Why is it so important to you? It's a huge ingredient. And then the 4th ingredient I talked about last week is that you need to have the chutzpah to declare and claim that what you want and do so without apology, to confidently say, I want X or I want Y or I want Z. Those are the first 4 ingredients, and that's what we're going to pick up today. So that brings us to the 5th ingredient. The 5th ingredient is kind of a doozy, actually. I could make an argument that it's probably the most challenging ingredient. It's the one that requires the most of us. It's the one that says you must be willing to let go of that which is not working. Okay, so that means the ingredient is to let go the stuff you're doing, the stuff you're thinking, the stuff you're feeling that's not bringing about the life that you want. Now that's a challenge, really, because this requires of us several things. First of all, we have to be smart enough to put it all together that the thing that we're doing or feeling or thinking is not giving us the results that we want. So we have to be insightful enough to be able to go, that thing right there that we keep doing, I got to stop doing it. And then the second part of that is you have to be willing to let it go. And we humans have a hard time changing or letting things go. And then the third part of this is actually doing the work to release it. So you can see why it's hard. You have to be smart enough to see what you're doing that is counter to the life you want. Be willing to let it go and then actually do the work of letting it go. So let me give you an example. So let's say you want to lose weight. But every day you find yourself in the drive-thru of some fast food restaurant. That doesn't take rocket scientists to go, you know what? I'm not losing weight because I'm eating at a fast food restaurant every day. You don't have to be super, super smart to realize that those two things do not go together. So you might see that pretty quickly. Okay, I got to stop going through fast food restaurants. Then number 2, you got to be willing to let it go, which means you've got to be willing to no longer eat the food that either you like or that's quick or whatever the reason is you're going there. You've got to be willing to change that behavior. And then thirdly, you've got to actually change that behavior. You've got to find your food somewhere else. You've got to break old habits. But in that example, that might not be so hard because it's directly counter to what you want. I want to be leaner and healthier, so therefore I'm willing to let go of, food that's not very good for me. Well, that one's not so hard. But there might be other things that sometimes are a little more tricky that we are thinking about, or things that are holding us back. They might be beliefs that we believe to be absolutely true about money or about work or about struggle that we might not even see are in fact hindering our ability to have a healthy life or a beautiful life that we're trying to create. I'll give you an example for me. I sometimes am surprised when I discover that I still have really major beliefs about the fact that earning money and working should be hard. I so much so have this belief that I'll create things to make it more difficult. And that if something is too easy or too pleasurable, then it should not bring me financial abundance. Now that is counter to the life I want to create. Yet I still, on many levels, have this belief that money can only come to me when I've worked really hard and kind of suffered for it. So I've got to be smart enough to realize when I have that thought, be willing to let that go, and then do the work of actually letting it go. That's why this 5th ingredient is so hard. I've got to do a whole podcast or maybe a whole series on this one, but I hope with this description you get what I'm talking about here, that the 5th ingredient is to realize what are you doing that's counter to the life that you want, and you've got to be willing to let it go. So that's number 5. Like I said, it's a doozy. Now, number 6 is another concept that I've been chewing on for a while. I've mentioned it in a few podcasts, so I'm going to try to do my best here. Number 6 is the ingredient of what I'm calling right now tension. It's where things are tight enough where stuff gets done, but loose enough where creativity and inspiration can live. Let me say this another way. Imagine a drum. I've used this metaphor before. A drum, if it's too tight, can actually break or makes a terrible sound. If it's too loose, it won't make any sound. We need a life that's taut, but also not so taut that it breaks. So what does that mean in our life? It means that we have to have enough things in our life that are stable and predictable that give us security, but we also have to create enough tension where we are leaping over into the uncomfortable, or like the saying goes, getting out of our comfort zone, or stretching ourselves enough to keep our energy alive and vibrant. I'm calling this tension. It's kind of like paradoxical when you want to be both planning out your life but also allowing for spontaneity. The sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. That's what I'm talking about, the tension between these two opposites. And when you have that tension is where real happiness resides. This is my belief, this is my observation, is that when folks have enough tension that keeps them engaged on a daily basis, but not so much in a stress place that they can't have fun and vibrance. So Again, this warrants a whole lot more conversation, and I'll be doing a lot more podcasts on this. But this is sixth ingredient is this idea of tension, where things are not too loose, but things are not too taut. So I'll just say this. If you're a person who has got everything planned out and everything is just very, very crisp and planned, then you need to loosen up. If you're a person who asks very little of yourself and keeps everything pretty loosey-goosey or keeps your goals pretty low, then you need to tighten up a little bit. Again, just a tip. So that's the sixth ingredient is tension. Which brings us to the final ingredient, which is also kind of hard to explain. And this is the ingredient of being able to embrace the mystery. This is where I'm going to throw in words like inspiration or magic or spirituality. And it kind of comes down to the belief that, you know what, with all the planning and all the thinking and the feeling and the knowing, that there's still a lot of stuff that's just not up to you. There's the universal magic that's out there. And folks who embrace this piece, I have found and observed and felt in myself, are happier. It's like when you pray and move your feet. It's like when you create inspiration, you create a plan, but then you allow for inspiration to come in. It is this magic. It is this sense of something outside of yourself, whether it is from source, from God, from spirit, whatever your belief is, or whether it's just accidental things floating around in your universe that pop into your lap, however you want to look at it. This seventh ingredient is being willing to embrace that kind of magic can happen and will happen. So if you think about this like a recipe, it's like the secret ingredient that you don't even really know what it is. Okay? So happier lives have this element of mystery or inspiration or sense of wonder, you might even say. So that is the fifth, sixth, and seventh ingredients. So let's go back over them. So imagine we've got a big pot here and we're going to create your ideal life. It begins by taking 100% responsibility for everything. That's the number one ingredient. Then number two, you have to be able to say what it is you want to the best of your ability at any given time. That doesn't mean I know forever what I want, but I might be able to say for right now, this is what I want. And I want to be able to describe it, feel it, see it, and know it when it gets here. The third ingredient is to be able to understand and tap into why I want this. Why do I want this thing or this kind of adventure or this financial abundance or this relationship or this kind of job? Why do I want it? The why is the fuel. The fourth ingredient is I've got to be Oh, no, I got it mixed up. The fourth ingredient is that I have to have the chutzpah to be able to say and look myself in the eye and say, you know what? I want that. And to be able to declare it without caveats or without apology and say, I want that. This life I'm designing is the one I want. Then the fifth ingredient is to be able to be insightful and smart enough to see what it is that you're currently doing that you've got to let go of. It might be people, it might be behaviors, it might be thoughts, it might be feelings. What are you willing to let go of so that your ideal life can come to fruition? And then you've got to be willing to create some tension where you are giving yourself enough energy so that causes growth, that tension and friction enough between where you are and where you want to be. That's what causes this growth and keeps you moving, that friction and that tension. And then lastly, the last ingredient is being able to embrace the mystery, the spirit, the magic that can come to you. Those 7 ingredients are what I call the recipe for your ideal life. And I think some of them are pretty lofty. None of them are particularly hard in the moment. They're kind of woo-woo-y concepts. But the truth is, I have observed in my own life, and I've observed in the life of my clients, those of us who can do the majority of those steps most of the time are pretty damn happy. And after all, isn't that the goal? Isn't that the goal, that we're living a life that when it comes time for our life to end, we look back and we don't have any regrets. We say, you know what? I lived the life I wanted. I did the things that I wanted. I had the experiences that I wanted. I've left the legacy that I want. So I hope that wherever you are in your life's journey, that you'll take stock in your own life and to say, do I need to do some work? And I hope that these 7 ingredients can give you some inspiration on where to start. And if you need my help, I hope that you will understand that getting help from me or anyone else might be the turning point for you. Athletes have coaches. I have coaches. We all need to have someone outside of ourselves at certain points in time to hold up a mirror and reflect back to us and give us ideas and be accountable to. So if I can be that person for you, I invite you to go to sherryhoneycutt.com. And if you use the code podcast20, that will give you a 20% discount off of your first coaching session with me. So thank you so much for taking time to listen today. I hope that you found a pearl or 2 or 3 or 4 that you can put into place that will help you create a more beautiful life starting right now. And if this podcast has brought you something positive, I invite you to subscribe or make a comment or tell other people. I really, really, really like to be passed around. I also invite you, like I said a few moments ago, go to my website. I have a couple of freebies. I have other podcasts, things that can help you create your ideal life starting today. And I end on this note. I want you to remember you can have a beautiful life. You just have to clear your mind and clear your clutter so you can clear a path to the life that you've always intended. Until next time.